Welcome to the 50-50 Aftershow presented by Champion, Google, and Gatorade. I am your host, Katie George, and joining me is the wonderful Christine Williamson. And we're here with you reacting to what we just saw during parts 3 and 4 of the ESPN film, 37 Words. Christine, it's of course always great to be with you, but what did you think of the film, 37 Words, specifically what we just saw in parts 3 and 4?
I think it's wild, right? Because obviously Title IX was groundbreaking and it did a lot for women and women college athletes, student athletes, etc. I think the thing that was so crazy, especially about 3 and 4, is how much further we still have to go. I think that that's the one thing that I paid attention to when I was watching it, right? Like we have come so far, but we still have a long way to go. But I think the thing that's the most encouraging is just seeing, especially how many young women are really fighting for their rights and kind of standing up. Whereas I don't feel like people felt like they had the ability to do that at one point. So I think that's definitely very encouraging.
It was interesting to me because we got to hear from so many different voices, which I thought was very, very important because obviously the catalyst, I think, in all of this is oftentimes the U.S. women's national team. They're always involved and they're always using their voices, but we got to hear from so many more people outside of just former national players, current national players who have been champions of Title IX and elsewhere, women's rights in general and equity. We got to hear from college coaches like Dawn Staley. We got to hear from high school student athletes. We got to hear from parents and adolescents, young youth, children trying to aspire to be great athletes down the road. And I thought that that was really unique, that they didn't just focus on one entity or one specific group of people or team. We got to hear so many different stories and get to, be involved in moments and snapshots of how it's affecting people, what they're fighting for. And I really enjoyed getting to know and learn about a lot of different things. I also thought too, I don't know about you, as a benefactor of Title IX and playing college volleyball, I always just assumed Title IX was about sports and women in sports. Right. I had no idea Title IX was so encompassing and involved so many different facets of protecting females in all kinds of capacities. So I thought that that was really educational and something that I learned watching the entire film.
Yeah, it's actually crazy that you said that, because while you were talking before you said that, I was thinking about the fact that, when I was a student athlete, I only understood Title IX to be something that allowed me to play sports, right? So honestly, when I was watching the film, I was a little confused. I was like, wait, what does this have to do with sports? You know what I'm saying? I don't quite understand the connection. I actually had a conversation last week with some people who were in the WNBA or women's basketball players, and they were talking about the fact that they honestly didn't even realize what Title IX was and how a lot of people, even if they are athletes, don't realize what Title IX is. So I think that's another thing that's very interesting. We didn't really realize how, why Title IX reaches, but then also some people that are also athletes don't really realize the impact of Title IX and what exactly it is. So I just find it all very fascinating.
Which is a good thing and a bad thing, right? Because we should be educated on the history of it and know all the titans that came before us and who have allowed us these opportunities. But also, I think pretty special that young girls everywhere grow up knowing that the sports world is their oyster. They can do whatever they want to do. They can try out for whatever sport they want to try out for. And that shows the progress that we have made. I think Abby Wambach made that point early on in part 3, that what a luxury young girls have right now to not have known the fight that was raging on for so many years because the road has been paved for them. So these two parts showed incredible changes that happened over the past several decades. Part 3, we witnessed the U.S. women's soccer team inspire not only a country, but an entire generation of women. And then in part 4, we see children and young adults still fighting for Title IX in many different ways. So Christine, what do you think the future of Title IX and women's rights looks like moving forward?
As I said, we still have so much longer to go. And I've asked people this question, when will we know that the fight is over? And it's kind of hard to benchmark what that looks like. You know what I mean? How do we say, okay, we don't have to fight anymore, right? Because I kind of feel like there will always kind of be these battles. But I think Julie Foudy in the 3rd episode, she said something and she was like, when we don't need to have these conversations and when we don't need to discuss or have a Title IX or when things just happen because there is equity and everybody is equal, and we don't have to have the conversations as to be like, hey, by the way, women are important. When we don't have to have that conversation, I think that we'll know that the fight is over. But I think we have such a long way to go. If you think about like what happened with Sedona Prince in the bubble, in the inequity when it came to the weight rooms. Cheryl Miller was a player in the 80s, and she said that she was having those issues back then, right? Yeah. So like this is the same exact thing that we were dealing with in the 80s. It just happens that like we have TikTok, and so we're able to TikTok, and then it blows up, and then the media picks it up, et cetera. But she was like, these were the same exact issues that we were dealing with. So it's not like it was anything new. And the fact that it was the same exact issue is mind-boggling to me. And it's been years since that moment. So I think we definitely have a long way to go. And I think the future it's promising because we do have a platform to actually speak out. Student athletes have a platform, women have a platform to actually say, hey, look at these inequities. But I think we'll know that the fight is over when we don't have to have these conversations anymore.
I think Julie Foudy is the perfect example in terms of this conversation and this question, because 1972 was the year that Title IX went into effect. In 2002, Julie Foudy sat on a commission. She was a member of a 15-person commission on opportunities in athletics, where she and Donna Lopiano released a minority report that helped uphold the many facets of Title IX, because they were trying to roll back in 2002 some of the protections of Title IX. And she said, that was important to her to sit on that commission and be a member of that, and to fight for Title IX as it was in that moment. And hopefully in 50 years, we're not having commissions where we need somebody like an Abby Wambach or a Megan Rapinoe or Sabrina to sit on and continue to fight, where it's not a part of the conversation. It's just the reality that we're in. And I also thought a interesting quote was, we're conditioned as females to be grateful for everything you get. And I oftentimes, and I'm sure you come across this as well, but even in the business world, outside of sports, you often hear female business leaders, CEOs say, I feel really lucky to have this opportunity, or I'm blessed and I'm very grateful to have been promoted or to get to do this opportunity. And, yes, maybe luck's involved to a degree, but also we've earned the right to be in these positions. We've earned the right to have state-of-the-art weight rooms at the NCAA basketball tournament. We've earned these rights because Title IX gave us the opportunity in 1972, but then as females, we made the choice to play these sports, to sacrifice a great deal, to work so hard, and we earned, the benefits that come with that, I think. And that's important to remember as we move forward, that we shouldn't be conditioned to be grateful. Yes, you want to be a grateful individual in general, because that's what makes a good person, but also, you should also applaud earning and working hard to all the benefits that we receive as athletes and just women in general. So I think once we get to that place, it'll be better as well. So yes, still certainly a lot of work to be done. Now it's time to be your own champion, presented by Champion. And in this segment, I wanted to highlight the young women in part 4 of this film. They prove that in order to continue moving forward, we have to be our own champions. It was so inspiring to see all these young women fighting for Title IX and equal rights, and ensuring that the work we learned about in parts 1 and 2 continues to have an impact on the daily lives of young women around the country. So whose fight from part 4, Christine, inspired you most?
8-year-old Sunny Bryant was, I think, one of my favorite stories. I think often, and especially with what's going on now in sports, right? We're seeing this in real time, but like the fact that Title IX also applies to transgender athletes isn't something that we thought about before transgender athletes were trying to compete, right? And so seeing her at such a young age, knowing who she was, and then starting to fight for her rights at such a young age, like when we talk about these women that are still moving the ball forward, I would have never have understood or known that I could fight for my right to do anything when I was 8 years old. So her having the courage to just basically stand up for herself and have a voice, and realize that she does have a voice and she has a ground to stand on, I think was really inspiring, just because she was so young and she understands what her rights are as a transgender athlete.
Yeah, I thought that that was an incredible story to share a part of part four. I also thought, in terms of us discussing, still have a long way to go. The fact that Grant High School's softball team played at Wilshire Park and didn't have bathrooms, didn't have a water fountain, didn't have a fence in the outfield to hit home runs over, that there were rocks in the infield. I mean, you can go on and on, huge, massive puddles that they would try to dry up before they would start practice. The fact that that is the state of a high school sports team and where they have to play in 2020, 2021, 2022,
Right.
like that was mind boggling to me, that they weren't afforded a arena stadium of their own, practice field of their own. And so that was eye opening to me, that, gosh, we're still trying to fight at the high school level, you know, for female athletes and female sports teams to have exactly what their counterparts do. And that would be the boys having a state of the art new baseball field that was a part of Grant High School's, you know, expansion or remodel of the entire school. And I thought that that was eye opening, and power to those young girls and their softball head coach for saying, you know what, we're going to sue and we're going to figure this out. And they ended up settling. And I think one of the contingencies that was really important in that case was they built in a clause that said, until our field and stadium is built, the boys can't play on their field either. And you never want something to be at the detriment of another, but it was an added incentive to get the job done, because I think had they not said the boys can't play on their field either, it might not have actually happened as quickly as it did. And now they have a beautiful field that they're playing on. And I think it's so paramount that young women everywhere are finding their voice and learning to stand up for themselves and to fight when they don't feel like they're getting a fair shake. I thought that was huge.
And I thought it was very interesting because one of the players said that when they found out about the clause, the baseball team was like, well, why do you guys need a field?
Yeah.
It's just like, you guys need a field because you're playing on it. We need a field because we need to play on it. And I think also the visual of the head coach just getting all the water up, just saying she was using her lunch break in order to do that, and not thinking this is absolutely ridiculous at the time. Like, obviously she was very upset that she was in that position, but like, she just did it because that was what she had to do. It's just a mind-boggling situation. But I don't know if you were ever in a situation when I was a student athlete. I remember the football players telling me that like my sport was like so much easier because I'm this and that and this and that. So I think it's just a mindset that a lot of people have just grown up with. The fact that these high school male student athletes are looking at these women and saying, well, why do you need a field to play on? Is just, it's mind-boggling.
Yeah. And I applaud the head baseball coach at the end of that portion, saying, I sat down and said, yes, it's unfortunate that we don't get to play at our field, but you need to support these women because they deserve to play on a beautiful field as well. They deserve every benefit, every aspect that makes you good at what you do to allow them to excel at what they do in their game. And I thought that that was a nice snapshot into a man trying to educate young men as to the importance of why women deserve just as much as they do. And I thought that that was pretty cool. So there were so many great stories and moments shared throughout this film. And I'm curious to you what resonated most, because for me, it was in part 3 with Aurelia Davis, the mother of LaShawna Davis, who sued the Monroe County Board of Education under Title IX because the public elementary school that her daughter attended would not protect her from sexual harassment. And, you know, you send your child to school with the idea that they're going to be safe. And this is the educational part for me, because I didn't realize Title IX covered and protected females in so many different ways outside of sport. And so, you know, Aurelia Davis showed so much courage because LaShawna comes home, and LaShawna showed courage because she voiced what was happening to her, number one, to her mom. And they went to the teachers, nothing happened. They went to the principal, nothing happened. And, you know, even Aurelia's husband said, well, maybe we should let it go. But I appreciated the conviction that she had, because she said she wanted to make her daughter a better woman by showing her an example of someone who stands up against what is wrong and fights for what is right. And so she went to the library and started educating herself. And Aurelia ended up suing the Board of Education under Title IX of the Federal Education Act, which in the past, as you and I have said, was just perceived as prohibiting discrimination against women in athletics. the question for the court, at that time was, well, whether a student-on-student sexual harassment was just another form of discrimination. And so I really appreciated hearing that story. I can't imagine what that was like for LaShonda and Aurelia in general going through that, but it was more than LaShonda getting the respect and protection that she deserved, because it changed the way that public schools across the country had to protect and step in for their students. And I thought that was absolutely massive, because the Supreme Court ruled in favor of Aurelia Davis 5-4. And I thought that was an incredible shift. And if it wasn't for a mother's love, I don't know if something would have changed, and right. Students, at that age would have been protected in that way. So that resonated with me most. What about you?
Yeah. And going off of that, like thinking about how that impacted like the students that were at Berkeley High School after that, and knowing that they had that Title IX applied to them and that they had a fight to fight. Because when you think about it too, like, especially with so many of the women students having that experience at that high school, right? And people just trying to be like, oh, boys will be boys, it's just young kids. That one quote where that girl said, a lot of people are just saying, oh, they're young kids and they're just going through something right now. Like eventually they'll get over it. And it's like, wait a second, this is actually not just like a young boys being boys. So yeah, them being able to just fight for their rights as women was awesome to see. I think the thing that was crazy to me, because you remember these moments in sports, right? When Abby Wambach got the Icon Award from ESPN, and she was standing next to Peyton Manning and she's standing next to Kobe Bryant. And I remember that moment and thinking, wow, look at this, absolutely killing it. So the story behind the story to me was so mind-boggling, because when she said she was mad, right? Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, why are you mad? Like, this is an amazing accomplishment. This is an amazing achievement. And she was like, I'm standing next to Kobe and Peyton. And I'm like, cool. Now I have to go find a job or like figure out what I'm going to do with the rest of my life, because unlike them, she didn't have her whole entire, she didn't have enough money to pay for her entire life. And she mentioned the fact that she was still one of the highest paid female athletes, but she still couldn't pay for her entire life. Whereas these two gentlemen, obviously Kobe Bryant, rest in peace, have their whole entire life set, right? So I just found that very interesting, because it's not something that I know at the time I was looking at and think I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, wow, this is amazing for women. They're all on the same level playing field. This is great. And during the whole entire time, she's thinking, wow, I'm actually mad because my life isn't set up in the way that these guys are. So I think hearing the story behind that situation and realizing how huge the gap is between men that are athletes and women that are professional athletes is just, it's wild.
Yeah, it's the perfect segue to our time for search trends presented by Google. And today's trend is equality can't wait, which is a breakout search in the US over the past 5 years. And, after watching parts 3 and 4, it's extremely obvious that statement couldn't be more true. You mentioned Abby Wambach saying, I didn't have the money to be retired and to go on about my life like these gentlemen did on the stage. I liken it to the WNBA and the CBA that, was so pivotal, and that has, essentially been a catalyst for women in that league being able to make more. You have Robin Roberts and Ivy Uneka and a couple others, and they're saying, yeah, we're going to triple salaries. And I think that's because, obviously the U.S. women's soccer team has been very vocal about equal pay for women in sports, and that has moved the needle certainly for them in their sport. But the WNBA is certainly trying to, make it more advantageous. So you don't have women who play in the WNBA and then have to go overseas to different countries in the off season to offset their salary. So that's certainly a reason why, equality can't wait in the matter of pay. But, why is it crucial that equality can't wait in your mind?
Well, I think one thing to point out is the fact that I feel like I'm such a Debbie. I'm like, we still have so much further to go. But I think the idea that that there is such a huge gap between men and women is it's honestly ridiculous. And I think the thing to me that's crazy is the fact that people haven't thought it was ridiculous for a long time, and that we're still convincing people that it's ridiculous. Like, women are just as capable, are just as strong, just as whatever as men. So the fact that we still have to tell them that part point blank period is wild to me. But like, obviously, because women are doing the same jobs as men, if not better, equality is definitely important. And I think you mentioned the thing with the WNBA, and I say that they have a long way to go, but it's still wild to me that, you know, the like you said, you have players playing overseas, you have players that are sitting in coach that are 6'9", and they can't even fit their legs on flights. And so I think the idea that we're still in that space and that we still have to convince people that this inequity is ridiculous. So like I said, we still have a far way to go, but I honestly don't know what equality would actually look like either. Right. This is another thing I was talking to somebody about, and like what when it comes to equal pay and like all of that kind of stuff, like how we level the playing field, because I think because women's sports is so far behind men's sports, it's hard to make everything equal, just like out of the gate when it comes to pay, when it comes to facilities and all that stuff. So I think it's an interesting conversation to try to figure out, there's so many gaps that have to be filled, what comes first and how that kind of works logistically. But yeah, it's a lot.
It is. And I also think too, celebrating the moments that need to be celebrated, like Dawn Staley's contract at South Carolina, $22 million is unbelievable and well-deserved. I mean, you and I could go on and on about Dawn Staley's career and what she does for young women. She takes them where they're at and gets them to go where they want to go and where they want to be, who they want to be. And I just think that she's not just a head coach of women's college basketball. She's so much more than that. And so you celebrate moments like that when she's getting the credit that she deserves. She's also getting the pay that she deserves. And it opens the door or raises the ceiling, however you want to look at it, for women that are in the ranks with her or are going to come behind her. And I think that it's always great to celebrate those kind of moments as well, knowing that there's still, certainly a gap that we're working to close. All right, now it's time for Fuel Tomorrow, presented by Gatorade, where I'm going to showcase the next generation of athletes. I'm going to shine a self-serving spotlight on my hometown of Louisville, Kentucky, Christine, to highlight a girl by the name of Ella Sanchez. Ella is a rising senior at Ballard High School here in Louisville, and she just received the Gatorade Kentucky Girls Soccer Player of the Year award after her junior season, where she recorded 64 goals and added 14 assists. She's a member of a youth program and feeder system of Racing Louisville, which is a newer addition to the NWSL. She, like so many young athletes, is driven, competitive, and has all the intangibles that you would want in a leader. Watching her play and seeing her play and grow in the game of soccer reminds me, that what you see on television, what is accessible, what content you're able to intake as a young person, as a young female, as somebody interested in sports, it certainly matters. And that was a moment in part 3 or part 4, I can't remember which, but seeing the Rose Bowl, and maybe I think it was the 1991 World Cup or 1996 World Cup, seeing the Rose Bowl sold out for US versus China was insane to me and gave me chills watching that many people cared about women's soccer at that moment to go support those women. And now Ella didn't grow up watching that game in particular, but she's grown up watching the Olympics and the World Cup. And she's grown up being a fan of Lindsey Horan and Megan Rapinoe and Wambach and so many others. And so you have to show the game to grow the game. People at our ESPN executives say that all the time. I mean, look at the College World Series when it comes to softball. I mean, How many people love watching the Women's College World Series? And that was, credit to someone named Meg Aronowitz who said, you have to show the game to grow the game. And young female athletes like Ella have grown up watching the best women's team in the world and Team USA. And I think that makes all the difference in the world for young females as they enter the world of sports, whatever sport that may be.
Yeah, I think that's what we saw with the WNBA, especially that bubble season, right? Like, a lot of people were talking about how we, people don't watch the W. It's not the same as men's basketball. NBA is more interesting, and that was always the knock on the league. Like, people aren't watching because they're not interested. But then when you show WNBA games on ESPN and on ABC, people are watching and you see the numbers grow. I think about the orange hoodie, right? Understanding how huge that was during the height of the pandemic and how it became a symbol, right? People were wearing it all over the place. The hoodies were getting sold out online, and thinking about the fact that, you know, I think a lot of times people are like, oh no, people aren't going to buy merch. I actually talked to the person who was a part of the Orange Hoodie campaign, Ev Jones, and she was talking about how on Fanatics, they didn't want to put the WNBA merch on the front of the page because they didn't think that they sold. So then by the time the hoodies were selling out, there was no place, people didn't know where to go on the website, all this stuff, but it's like, it allowed the opportunity for people to consume women's athletics, then I promise you they will deliver. And I think that's the biggest thing. Like you said, you have to know the game, you have to show the game. First of all, especially in this situation when it comes to younger athletes, when you watch people play sports, I don't know, I never watched volleyball growing up, but like I watched a lot of basketball. I watched a lot
wasn't shown. Volleyball it wasn't shown, exactly. Right? So you had to watch basketball, right. You had to watch other sports.
Exactly. Watching gymnastics, and I remember wanting to be like those athletes, and so getting the opportunity to watch people play that look like you when you're a young age. Also, when you talk about I forget the exact number, I think it was 1 of 27, or like the number was 1 to 27 of like female to male athletes before Title IX. I forget what the gap, it was a lot smaller number. But like
1 in 3 or 1 in 4.
Yeah, it was amazing. It's like, can you imagine 1 in 27 to 1 in 3? Like that jump is so huge. And it's just because women were given the opportunity to play.
Mia Hamm, I think after the World Cup said, you give us the opportunity, but then it's our choice to do something with it. And right. We all chose to play this game and make those sacrifices, and look what's come of it. We're the best team in the world because you gave us the opportunity to at least make that choice for ourselves. And I thought that was powerful. You know, Christine and I obviously applaud all those involved in the creation of this incredible 4-part documentary series. And I hope women and men around the country watched and learned the links people went to pass Title IX into law. And then we hope, you know, they see why it needed to happen and what must continue to happen to ensure that Title IX is upheld. And, you know, as we wrap things up here, Christine, do you have any final thoughts just about 37 words?
Like I said, we have so much further to go, but I think, like you said, it's very encouraging to see how far we've come. And I can't wait till we just don't have to have this conversation anymore, because everything just makes sense and everybody's on the same page, and we understand that women deserve more platforms, more opportunities.
Yeah. When it's just a part of everyday life and a reality, we know that everybody who has fought for this have done their job. Right. This has been the 50/50 Aftershow presented by Champion, Google, and Gatorade. It's been a pleasure spending time with you talking about ESPN's film 37 Words. You can catch parts 1 through 4 on ESPN+. I'm Katie George. She's Christine Williamson. Thank you and goodbye from the kitty.